All right, and welcome back to the Black Psychologist Podcast. Appreciate everybody listening. We're at episode 12, so we are moving right along. Appreciate everybody watching, listening, subscribing, and commenting. It's great, I am your host, Dr. Kyle Osborne, and of course, I'm never here by myself. I'm here with the funky, fresh, dressed, and pressed, ready to party, Dr. Jason Coleman. How are you? Good, brother?
I'm good, bro. What's up with you, man? How are you today?
We're here, man. Another week. We out here saving lives, man. This is what we do.
Hey, man, can't complain, right? Busy, but ain't gonna complain about that,
Yes, sir. So again, shout out to everybody listening, everybody watching. We appreciate your commenting. We appreciate the subscribing. We're getting great feedback. As you see, Dr. J and I are absolutely interactive with things. So we see the comments, we respond, and we're loving the conversation. We're loving the ideas. We're loving the topics that you guys are suggesting and giving us feedback on. So keep it coming. We love it. So, and we definitely appreciate the support. So, shout out to you guys, the listeners, the subscribers. Again, we appreciate all the love. All right, so we're going to start off with some things that some information, some current events and pop culture. So recently, Dr. J, we saw an article. We saw Willow Smith, which is the daughter of Jada and Will Smith. She recently came out on a Red Table Talk, which is hosted by Jada Pinkett. She recently came out and announced that she is practicing polyamory, and she's a polyamorous. So for a lot of people that don't or aren't aware of what polyamory is, it's a lifestyle which essentially, you're not confined to being in a monogamous relationship. You have the ability to have a relationship with other people, men, women, whatever, sexual orientation they practice. It's, so that's pretty much, I guess, a broken down or a summary of what polyamory is. So, I saw some bits and pieces of the conversation, of the interview, and it was interesting. Jada does pretty decent work on her Red Table Talks. I love the family element of her, including her grandma, her mom, Gammy, in the conversations when she has her guest, and then, having her daughter on there. So I thought it was, I love that element. So just viewing the interview, what was your takeaway? What was your thought about it?
Well, I was kind of looking at the dynamic, right? First, like the fact that, you got kind of three generations that are having that kind of conversation, right? That have that type of communication or relationship where they can have that type of conversation. Obviously, it's a big topic. A lot of people are talking about it. Kind of like obviously, Willow Smith's choice, it's her personal choice. So we're not kind of here to cast judgment on that, but talking about like the bigger issue in terms of like non-monogamous versus monogamous relationships, or, it was kind of interesting, right? Because a lot of like when she was talking about her reasoning, she was talking about, she said the main reason why, divorces happen is infidelity, and she was kind of talking about her perspective on it was basically talking about the 80-20 kind of thing, right? Like how people say, right? Like, just because I can't, like, I might not have the same sexual needs or other needs, does it mean that you can't have them, right? So there's two ways to look at this, you know what I mean? Like, and I know it's a controversial thing, but I think it's just interesting because one thing she said was, she's like, I feel like the main foundation is the freedom to create a relationship style that works for you. Right. So if she's the type of person, we're talking about consenting adults, you know what I mean? So if she and the people that she chooses to be in a relationship with, if they feel like that works for them, you know what I mean? And it satisfies their needs. I don't really have a judgment and like a negative judgment about it. You know what I mean? Whether or not it would be my lifestyle, that's, it's probably not for me. I don't think I would be able to handle, more than one person. But
more than one person, can't handle that, bro. It's like,
hey man,
you can't spread the love.
Listen, I can't handle it financially alone. I'm out. I'm out, bro. You know what I'm saying? Financially alone, I'm out. But just in terms of the emotional kind of toll, and that kind of leads me into the next piece, right? Because that's kind of just, you know, what's going on in popular culture. But, you know, we like to look kind of beneath the surface. So I looked at like a study, right? And they were talking about mental health and, you know, kind of like people who are like entrenched in that lifestyle, right? And are living that polyamorous lifestyle. And they were talking about like polyamorous versus monogamous wives. So they were looking at females. I think the sample here was about 200 people, you know what I mean? And they were looking at self-esteem, marital satisfaction, life satisfaction, you know, and a degree of agreement with the lifestyle, you know. And what I found was interesting is they found that the women in the polyamorous relationships had lower self-esteem or reported lower self-esteem. You know, they reported less life satisfaction, less marital satisfaction, you know, and more mental health symptomology, you know. And I just thought that was interesting because that's a relationship they chose to go into, you know what I mean? So I would have thought, again, that they would have either been equally, you know, they would have been comparably like equal in terms of what they were reporting, or they would have reported higher satisfaction personally, you know, but I don't know. What do you think about it?
I like the dynamic between the three generations was interesting to watch, right? And I believe that the controversy in this lifestyle, I think, is really rooted in a lot of the misconception, right? So I think she talked about it a little bit. Willow talked about it, where I think the misconception is a lot of people tend to think that, oh, well, it's just about sex, right? You know, you can have sex with so many different people, where it's like it's similar to like an open relationship, right, or open marriage, where it is different in the sense of, you know, I think open relationship more consists of, okay, if you and person A and person B are in a relationship, then maybe person A and B are able to go out and have like something brief, right? Or have sex or other different things. Where I think with polyamory is more of a situation where you're actually having relationships, right? Like deep rooted relationships. And it's almost like, you know, you're able to do stuff with a lot of people, but it's kind of like in an honest or ethical way of doing it, right? Whereas, you know what I mean? It's like that framework allows you to become involved with other people. And as she said, that big misconception that it's not about sex. I think you know, sex is a part of it. However, it's also in addition to you're actually having, or people are looking for other meaningful relationships in addition to the one that they're in with the first person. So I think that's where a lot of people maybe see like, well, it's controversial because you're just having sex and you're all over the place. Where it's, you know, people, at least the way she explained it, and from what I've read about, is that there are meaningful relationships that are taking place within the whole thing and the whole framework.
I mean, that was my understanding from how they explained it too. And, you know, they were kind of they were classifying it as, you know, like ethical non-monogamy, you know? So obviously you're talking about people that are consenting to that approach, right? One thing I felt that was interesting that I wanted to ask you about was the fact that Jada has said, she was like, most people practice monogamy because they feel like they have no other choice. So I'm asking you what your opinion on that is, right? And do you think that would change if you ask males or females?
I feel like it's, if you're traditionally, people operate in the monogamy relationship. So I feel like they don't have any other choice. It's like, hey, I'm gonna be in this relationship with this person to abide by those relationship standards, or, you know, that framework, then no, you don't have any other choice, right? It's like, I'm with this person. That kind of goes to the what's the term or the phrase that they used to say, like, you're gonna be with this person for the rest of your life if you get married, right? It's literally, so if you're looking at the of a traditional monogamous relationship, then yeah, I agree with Jada in that, yeah, no, you don't have any other choice. However, if you and your partner choose to be, like, I guess, like you said, more open, or you're going to practice this, you know, polyamory, you know, this type of relationship, then now you're about having options. And that's what the whole this is rooted in, is having all these other different options. And then I think it also comes to like values, right? So if you look at, that was the main thing that I like with Gammy, because when they asked Gammy if she would ever like consider being in this, he was like, no. It was a hard no too.
Right.
And you know, Jada, she attributed her reasoning for her mom saying no to, she said, oh, she just practices a different type of love. I attribute it to values, right?
Okay.
So they have a different set of values in each one of their type of like in their generation, as far as like their family framework. So Gammy is like, listen, monogamous, this is what I was raised upon. I value being in a relationship with one person.
Right.
Fast forward 2 more generations with Willow. We're in a society where there's a lot of different lifestyles, right? It's a lot of different options. So tradition is there, but you don't necessarily have to roll with that. And so I imagine her values, and I didn't grow up in her household, but I imagine Will and Jada have been very supportive of her just trying to find herself, right? Whatever you like to do, whatever you're involved in, whatever your fancy is, whatever you're interested in. Will and Jada have, at least from the outside looking in, have supported that. So this is where, that's been her values of being flexible, being free, finding what makes her happy. So she's going to be more into this lifestyle that is more open, and it allows her to have different options. So I thought it was more, you saw the value sets between each generation or between each woman when they were kind of going on for their reasons of practicing, monogamy or not.
I mean, I thought it was interesting. Obviously, they're in different worlds when it comes to like how they see, relationships and sexual relationships and all those kind of things. But I think when you see those stark differences between the generations, I mean, I don't know, what that, is due to. I'm not going to just throw something out there, but it's obvious, like you said, like Jada and Willow have very different ideas of, relationships and fulfillment within relationships and all of those things, right? And I mean, back to like everyone was shocked when Jada and Will had that conversation and, about August Alsina and all of that, right?
Yeah.
But think about it, like how they view those things has always been different, because if you look, like they've always supported their children in terms of navigating their identity, right? I remember when his son was finding his way, and he's doing all these different things with fashion, you know what I mean? And people had all these different reactions, and then Willow was kind of the same way in terms of her identity, sexually or otherwise, right?
Right.
So they've always been open kind of about those things. And my thing is just like, I just think like, as long as they're satisfied, like the outside judgment, obviously they're not worried about anybody else, you know what I mean? So they're not hurting nobody as long as it's consensual. I don't necessarily, obviously I don't have no problem with what they're doing. Like I said, it depends on whether that fits your lifestyle, right? And whether emotionally you can handle it, because from the outside, people just look at it like, yeah, it's people just having a whole bunch of sex, but there's a lot of different layers that are involved in that, right? You're talking about, think about all the things that go into a relationship, you know what I mean? Other than sex, right? That's a very small part of it. I mean, it's a major part, but it's a small part, So it's just a lot more to kind of consider. And I don't think, like, looking from the outside, I wasn't really looking at that. But I had a question for you, right?
Yeah.
When I was reading the study, they were talking about the findings. They had something called first wife syndrome, right? And they were talking about like the first wives reported more family problems, like more anxiety, less self-esteem, more paranoid ideation than the second and third wives. You know what I mean? And I kind of thought it would have been the other way around. Like I kind of thought, the first wife might have some standing. I don't know. I don't really know. I'm learning about it now, right? But what do you think about that? Them saying that the first wives kind of reported more distress. What you think could be behind that, if anything?
No, I think in a lot of relationships and in a lot of situations where you have someone that was married, divorced, and they get remarried, and I absolutely feel like the first go around, is probably a lot rougher, right? Depending on maybe where the two individuals were. Maybe if they're younger, they're just kind of starting out. Kids are younger, so it's a lot of different dynamics that are putting stress not only on themselves but on the relationship, right? So if things don't work out, the second go around, usually an individual is older, maybe more established.
Oh, they're talking about, bro, they're talking about the second wife that they bring into the fold.
Oh, okay. All right. So you're talking on that side. All right. Yeah.
Right. Right. They're talking about
also,
the
right?
first
So,
wives
yeah.
reported as I guess they brought the second and third wife in, the
Right.
first wife reported like increased anxiety, self-esteem, those things. You know what I'm saying?
Because polyamory has been around for a while. Because that was my thought process, right? It's been around in a few or a lot of different, cultures and a lot of different religions. However, it's only been that men were able to practice it, right? So like you said, it was just the wife. It was just, first, second, third wife, right? And like you said, that can be very expensive because in Islam and a lot of different, I forget the other, is it Mormon? I don't want to misspeak. But I think, whatever the show is, I know that's based on having the multiple wives and multiple families. You have to provide for them equally, either way, right? No matter what religion, you still have to provide for the first wife, the second wife, third wife. They all have to be equal, house, car, financially, all these things, right? So it's a situation where I feel like also since it's becoming more mainstream into the current culture or current society, is it controversial also because now women are allowed to practice it, right? Now that women are allowed to have that option, it's different where you have some situation, where the man is able to do it as long as he can provide for it, right? It's not looked down upon. But now if the woman is embracing her sexuality, she's able to practice, and move around and have different options, then it becomes a little different, right? Then it becomes a little controversial. So getting back to your question, yeah, I can kind of see it because it's almost like you're the first family, right? So things are just kind of starting out, and then there's I think a lot more stress that's involved with the first family than as opposed to when the second and third wife comes, and maybe things are a little bit more at ease, So that's what I'm thinking. I always feel like my thought process is that the first family, and a lot of different dynamics is that there's a lot more stress, there's a lot more anxiety. You're worrying about, okay, what is the other spouse thinking about, right? I remember when we talked about relationships a couple shows ago, it's like that those constant thoughts, right? How's my partner doing? Am I satisfying my partner? Does my partner really like me? Like all these other different questions come into the fold, and then what if that your partner or the husband in these situations wants to bring in a second wife, where it's just like, what am like I always wonder the mindset of a first wife if he's contemplating bringing in a second wife. Like what does that do to your mental state, even though it might be part of the religion?
I mean, right, and that's why I'm thinking about it. Like I kind of understand because it's a new person, right? So if you're the first wife, then you would think all your attention would be focused on that person. Now you're bringing somebody else in, right? So naturally your attention is going to go to that other person. And if that's a new relationship, then your attention may shift in that, But one thing I wanted to ask you about that you brought up that was interesting is I think the fact that, like you said, men were the only ones that were allowed to practice it before. And now, women have that same freedom, power, and control, right, over their own selves and everything else.
Right.
Maybe that is why it's a little bit more controversial now, where people are reacting to it that way, right? I wonder if it wasn't Willow Smith that said it, and it was like a young male, right? That was like, listen, well, Akon has said it for years, right? He's been practicing it for years, I believe so.
I heard something about that, yeah.
Right, and I don't know if when he was talking about it, it was getting this much publicity, right? So again, it might be confirmation bias, but it's kind of supports your point there. You know what I mean? Double standard, definitely.
Yeah, it's unfortunate that when it comes to even in this day and age, as much progress that we think we've made, I do feel like when certain individuals, especially women, when they are able to practice in that they're female empowerment, body empowerment, image empowerment, all these other different things that have options and say, hey, I'm going to take control of my sexuality and I'm going to do this, that, and the third, I do feel like it's definitely more backlash, right? I do feel like it's looked differently upon, like you said, maybe what if this was the son? What if this was Jaden saying like, hey, you know what, I'm gonna,
right.
And then I don't know if it would be as shocking, like, like, oh, well, what's that? Like, I don't think it would have as much of a reaction. And I like the percentage part that you mentioned with the first wives, right? Because you got to think also with attention. So if you're used to getting 100%, like he's coming home to me, the family, now you bring in wife number 2 in, now you're jumping up to 50, right?
Right.
So now the anxiety, now you're taking more, even if we're looking at it from a household standpoint, now a lot of that stuff that maybe you both are doing together is now falling more on you. If you're the new person coming in, you're already used to getting 50%. Like, cause you already came into it like, oh, he already got the first wife. So I already knew he's gonna be splitting his time, as opposed to now having 100%, and then now it's gonna be cut in half. And then the third wife comes in and already like, oh, I already know that I'm getting 25% or 30 or whatever. So I think they're already, the additional wives are coming in already kind of understanding what the situation is, as opposed to the first wife who's having it decrease, which is going to be adjustment, and probably no matter, even if it's a part of the religion, it's probably not going to be as, happy about the situation.
Right, that's a fact.
But it's unfortunate. I do think it's a double standard. For men and women, as far as like these lifestyle approaches, and men are allowed to be more free, allowed to have these options, and it's not, looked down upon, because it's been going on in a lot of different cultures for years. Right. So, but yeah, it was an interesting conversation, to watch it play out. So we'll stay tuned, because I also wonder if this is something that she's going to continue to, practice now. I mean, how old is Willow? She's like in her early 20s, right?
I think she's in her 20s.
So I also wonder, like we've talked about in values, right? How your value system changes as you get older. Mm-hmm. So the same things that were as important to us when we're in our in our late teens, early 20s is a little different once we get older, right? Not saying that it would change, but it is going to be interesting. I think always an interesting dynamic to see how people's values and things that are important to them, lifestyles and things of that nature, as she gets older. So I wonder if that'll be something that she still practices even as, she gets older. But we'll see.
Yeah, definitely got to keep an eye on that. Yeah, fact.
So moving on, staying with the same type of topic of sexuality, sexual orientation, and things of that nature. Move on to a pretty popular topic, but it seems to be taboo, right? No matter how way or you slice it. Porn, right? There's no good way to segue or introduce that in a soft manner, right? So we're gonna talk what is pornography. So the age-old question, is watching porn harmful, right? So according to the article that came across the desk, it's not. Porn is not harmful. However, research does suggest that watching porn is more likely to be harmless for the LGBTQ individuals, non-monogamous couples, and women. So if you're outside of those three groups, it could potentially be harmful for you. So if you're using porn to compensate for unmet sexual needs in a relationship, porn could be harmful. If you're an individual or a couple who's highly religious or morally opposed to porn, then the porn could be harmful. And if you're an adolescent who watches porn, you may learn unhealthy and unrealistic lessons about porn. What were your takeaways from this?
I mean, all right. I was just wondering, like, why. I'm not saying why, like, men weren't included into that.
Same thing. I was like, you know how they always used to ask us in school, like, what are the limitations of this article or the limitations of the study? I was like, boom, what about the guys?
Right. I was just curious because that just seemed strange. They were like, first of all, for them to just say the LGBTQ community, right? Like, that just sounded a little like because I know they didn't, their sample size, I mean, for them to be able to say that, I don't know what it was. I mean, I didn't have time to look at it, so I'm not gonna act like I did. But that's kind of what jumped out to me at first, right? That these were the three groups that they kind of, pointed out. Looking kind of beneath the surface, I definitely understand when they were talking about the risk in terms of adolescence, right? Because, in terms of them developing their idea of what appropriate sexual relationships are, pornography could be harmful because, they believe that's actually what happens, right? In terms of like sexual interactions, right?
Very, very misleading. It's not how it goes.
Right. So in that way, it can be harmful. I thought it was interesting when they were kind of talking about pornography and marriage, right? And they were kind of saying that obviously it's bad when we're like if there's secrecy involved, right? Leading to feelings of guilt. But I thought the part when they were talking about mismatched libido, like I kind of had mixed feelings on that, right? Because they were talking about individuals that might have like mixed match sex drives or whatever, and one person, I guess, is watching porn to kind of satisfy their desires, right?
Yeah.
Now they were talking about that where it would lead to dissatisfaction within the relationship. Now, I could understand that kind of on the surface, but then I'm like, well, what if that person, not saying that they're doing it so that they don't cheat, you understand what I'm saying? But if then they were like, all right, well, I'm not gonna watch porn, I'm not gonna, whatever gratification I get from that, I'm not gonna do it no more. To me, that just heightens the chances that they're gonna that they might be unfaithful in that relationship or struggle with that. You know what I mean? Because we've already established that that person can't meet their sexual needs. You know what I mean? So, I mean, for me, I think if a person, especially within a marriage, if your partner can't meet your sexual needs and you're using pornography, I guess, to kind of fill the rest of the void, I don't necessarily want to classify it a responsible use, but I mean, as opposed to the other ways that you might be able to fulfill your needs, as some people, irresponsible choices some people might make in terms of strip clubs or being unfaithful or those type of things, it seems less harmful from that aspect. Let me just say it like that. For that situation,
Yeah, I agree with you on that. I feel and believe that to be harm reduction. Right, because like there are a lot of other more extensive ways that could go. I'm thinking maybe it can be an issue in a marriage as if one person is, like you said, not getting their needs met, and the other party is like watching porn to get their needs met, and I imagine that they're maybe thinking about the element like, your partner is watching porn without, like, in secrecy, right? So maybe I'm thinking, that's because the partner is not being upfront with the other partner and saying, hey, I'm not getting my needs met, so I'm gonna go sneak off with the laptop, in the bathroom or something while you sleep, or and it just kind of grows from there because it's the secrecy. So I think that's the lack of intimacy. That's where I'm formulating where the issue is coming from, because then it also, I guess, turns into guilt. Maybe with the person that's sneaking off and not being forthcoming, it's like, I'm not getting my needs met, so I have to seek these means, as opposed to maybe if the couple is saying, hey, like the libidos aren't matching up, and so I'm being upfront and telling you, and disclosing that I'm watching porn. That's the thing I'm thinking, is maybe the sneaking off and the dishonesty around it. But I didn't really feel like that was, believe that that's as severe, because like you mentioned, there are so many other different, way more severe negative outlets that someone could do that with the mismatching sex drive.
I mean, I agree with that point, and I also think like the reason is important, right? That you're using pornography to fulfill that need, right? Because if the reason is, again, if the reason is you're trying to fulfill a need that you haven't shared with your partner, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Then we're talking about things that you might be feeling guilty about or shameful about, and that's a whole different thing, right? So we're not talking about if your partner finds the history and they're like, oh, You watched the movie without me.
Oh,
right?
you're
Like,
you're in. Oh, you're into this.
Then them looking and saying, well, what the hell is this? You know what I mean? So you know what I'm getting at, right? Without being too graphic. So again, then we get to so I think the motivation has something to do with it, right? So like you said, if you're talking about two people who have open communication, and you have one that's telling the other, like, listen, honey, I'm going to sleep, you go handle your business. You know what I mean?
Right.
That's one thing, right? But if you're out in the car, out in the shed, or you you gotta erase your history, but again, because you're fulfilling a sexual need that you might not be sharing with your partner, then that's other issues, right? Because you're repressing certain things, and there's feelings of shame and guilt and all type of things associated with that. So again, it's very much an individual kind of situation that you got to kind of consider,
Yeah, I mean, I think like you said, it's open communication, and apparently even with the LGBTQ, apparently according to the study, they have they watch more and than hetero groups, and they have little to no or negative effects from it. And the story, or I guess what I was thinking of, was maybe just a variety of, I guess, with porn, because along with the LGBTQ community, and I mean, again, that community is it's vast, right? It's so many other different areas and populations that are included. It's the same thing with porn. I mean, we're talking having a real conversation. There are multiple areas, multiple specialties, multiple like.
Well, I didn't know that. I didn't know that. So.
You didn't know that? All right.
Nah.
No, all right. Well, all right.
I didn't know that, bro. But
this is the psychoeducation piece, man. So, for those that don't know, there are multiple categories of in the porn world, and I think that caters to that demographic, right? There are so many different things, and so maybe it's that openness, like we just talked about before, where it is an outlet. It's more, people are able to go in and there's no guilt associated with it, right? You're already open, you're expressive, you're embracing your sexuality, you're embracing your orientation and your lifestyle. So I feel like porn is an area for individuals that are embracive of their own sexuality. There's no shame, there's no guilt. I'm gonna partake, I'm gonna view whatever fits my fancy and things. So I think I can definitely that's where I think that why there's so little negative effects from that community that watch porn. That's what I came up with. I came up with the one with the adolescents, like you were saying, is that was funny to me, because I feel like it's a half porn and half like you get unhealthy and unrealistic lessons also from your peers, right? Because we also know that as kids, man, like it's your peers are the most influential in your life, right? And even speaking from personal experience, man, like just the stories that when we would talk to each other, like, oh yeah, you got to do this and this. Wasn't none of that stuff true. It was terrible. It was not accurate. It was lies. And I feel like that's a good percentage. In addition to, if you're watching porn and thinking about, okay, this is what a relationship is, or this is what sex looks like. In addition to that, is very misleading. But then also the advice and the conversations you have with your friends are terrible, right?
Right.
are not reality based, or are not realistic. It will also have you like have a complete, misconception of what sex looks like.
No, that's a fact. But listen, I got a question, right? Because they made an interesting point in this article, and they were saying, like, why is it that they were saying that non-monogamous people were more skilled and open about discussing their sexual needs and desires in a non-shaming way? Non-monogamous people, when monogamous people should have the security, right? I would assume. Yes. Or in comfort. So why would they say that?
I mean, yes and no. I feel like with non-monogamous, you're free, right? Again, it's that element of being able to embrace and being free and say, hey, I'm into this, I like this. Having, you don't know how many times, right? And you would probably have a conversation, like I've seen, like, when speaking with clients, and even though you could be married with somebody for a long period of time, and I would love to get Ashley. I gotta, next time we have her on, I would love to get her input on this also. But even though you're married for a long period of time,
Mm-hmm.
like there might be some things, and again, porn has many different categories, right? So there might be an area where your spouse or your partner might be into something that might be less, what's the word I'm looking for? I don't want to say favorable, but like might be looked down upon, in her social group or her or his social group, right? So there might be
Right.
something that like, okay, honey, I'm into this, but I don't want to tell you I like this or this was my fancy because the shame will come into it, or the guilt, or you see what I mean? So I feel like those are part of those honest conversations that a lot of monogamous couples probably aren't having about
Right.
their sexual desires. And that might contribute to why the libido or why the sexual desires aren't being fulfilled anyway. Because if you're like, hey, honey, I'm into this, like you're in the dominatrix type stuff, and
Right.
you're not expressing that, or you're like ashamed to bring it up and communicate that to your spouse, then yeah, your sexual needs are not going to be fulfilled because there's always something that you're not getting. And then, even though you're monogamous with her, it's like, okay, you know what I mean? You're not open to that communication.
I mean, listen, I know it's gonna sound crazy, but I don't get that part of it, right? Especially if you're in a committed relationship, especially if you're in a marriage, only because that person has your social security number. I'm not trying to be funny. That's more personal than anything sexual you might ever want. That's they got your social security number, they got your bank account, and you don't want to tell them that you like bondage if that's what you like. So you're gonna go your whole life being denied that pleasure if that's your pleasure? To me, again, I think we get back to the foundation of why people are engaging in relationships, right?
Right.
Because if your partner cannot fulfill you sexually, I mean, listen, you can be the most like intellectually stimulating person in the world, right? At some point, biologically, that person's body's gonna be on fire. Biologically, bro, yeah. It's gonna happen, right? So if the person that's stimulating your mind or got all that intellectual conversation can't pleasure you that way, I'm not saying that you're out the door. You know what I mean? But there has to be some type of, you know what I mean? There has to be some type of compromise in terms of, most people view their role as, wanting to be in a position where they please their partner. Right. You know what I mean? So of course you wouldn't put somebody in a position where they're uncomfortable, but most people will stretch in terms of what, they will do or not do or experiment with, not experiment when it comes to their partner. So that's why I said I find it strange, because if you're gonna give somebody a social security number, have 100 bills with them, you know what I'm saying, have kids with them, you don't want to tell them, what you like, you'll tell them off.
It's a very counterintuitive dynamic, Jay. But it's practiced a lot because, again, how many situations has it been, like you just brought it up, where the spouse or the partner finds the laptop or the phone and they see the history and you're like, what? You're into this? You like right. This, right? Because I think the shame or the guilt or just hey, I think certain things aren't, these folks, they're not as comfortable, which is a shame, right? Because like you said, if you're going to be in a relationship with someone, you should be able to be open. You should be able to have these conversations without worrying about whether your partner is going to judge you or they're going to look at you with the side face or anything. You should be able to have these conversations, but unfortunately, there are a lot of relationships, and even more unfortunate, there are marriages that are happening, marriages that have been going on for years, where you still got people, hiding what their sexual desires or what their interests are from their partner due to whatever fear or concerns that we've talked about. And it's unfortunate because it continues to grow in more maladaptive, ways that are gonna be really detrimental for the marriage or for the relationship. I wouldn't want to do it or be in that situation also but unfortunately there are a lot of people that are in those circumstances, man.
Yeah, and I mean, again, I think it's probably one of those things also where it's one of those things that's probably reflected in several areas of a person's life, right? Like if they're not assertive about this need sexually, then it's probably other areas of their life they're not as assertive, So I could understand it. But again, when we engage in, monogamous relationships, long-term relationships, I mean, yeah, that's one thing you got to kind of try to put on the table, for lack of a better term,
Yeah, I think it's definitely, like you said, it's got to be on the table. It's got to be, hey, as you get more comfortable with the person, especially if this is going to be someone you want to share your life with, you're going to make it legal and official.
Right.
You should definitely be, as close as compatible as far as like with sexually, where you're able to say, hey, I can share this with my partner or what I'm into, and not because it's like you said, you got the intellectual piece, you got the emotional piece, but the physical piece is very important. The sexual piece
Right.
is very important in a relationship or marriage. So I don't know. I hope just
Hey man, that's interesting, man. But
it is. It is. All right, so moving forward, another article came across our desk, and there was a writer who distributed this piece, and she works primarily with helping people access grieving resources. Right. So this writer shared an email that she received, and the email goes like this: "Why is your site only for people of color? I guess you must grieve differently than an old white man. Disgusting and racist." So she provides people of color with unique support and with necessary information when these people of color are in grief, or they've lost somebody, or important. So this is something that she takes pride in and that she enjoys. And so the question is, do people of color grieve differently, Dr. J?
I mean, listen, I'm gonna be very honest. Like when I first read this, I mean, I thought the email was excessive, you know what I mean? But when I first read this, I was like, I'm like, well, grief is grief, right? So, but this is just my first thought, right? But reading through the article, she had some good and valid points, right? Now, I understand what she was talking about in terms of like people of color, especially in the context of what we're talking about, like today's, environment, and talking about Black males being killed, right? It's kind of like that sense of, where we're all kind of unified in that struggle, and when one person grieves, everybody grieves. When males of color, whether they're Black, Latinx, are killed, right? But unarmed males. So she was kind of talking about that, and about how those kind of things, trigger feelings inside of us, right? In terms of safety in our communities and our homes and dealing with the police. So I totally understand her from that standpoint, right? Because I've had days, right, where I remember when Walter Scott in South Carolina, when he was shot, right? And I'm watching coverage all day long, right? And then I'm driving home and I'm anxious, I don't know why, right? And these are the things she's talking about, right? And then she was, other things she was talking about in terms of the, trauma that we have stored inside our body. So I think she was making some good points. I think a lot of people are going to have trouble kind of understanding, the point she's making. But she just said, we grieve a little differently, and in the context that she was talking about with racial injustice and, in terms of our communities and all of those things, I think she was making good points. What did you think of it?
Yeah, I didn't think the email that she received was disgusting or racist. I feel like that's an extreme reaction. I mean, people are entitled to feel and express their emotion in any way, form. I feel like that was, a little extensive. Absolutely. When we're talking about a collective grief, like due to all the public killings of Black people, right. Yeah, there are absolutely some nuances there that we are grieving differently. Along with viewing something like the Walter Scott, like the Greg Floyd, like any of these things, like, no, there's a sense of like despair. When I watch something like that, when an event like that takes place, it's like we're also dealing with a sense of despair for the reason that a lot of people, myself included, and like you just mentioned in your example, like we feel that sense of hopelessness and helplessness. Right. So it's not like, oh, this person just lost their life. It's this person lost their life who looks just like me. And no matter, I have to live with the fear of loss. Like you said, you're driving in your car and you're looking, you're anxious. Like you're experiencing this anxiety. You're just being in your car because you know what? No matter what precautions, no matter what things we put in place, I still feel like, you know what? I'm not going to be able to keep myself safe. Right. I feel like this sense of helplessness and hopelessness that I can't keep myself safe. I can't keep my kids safe. Right. I can tell her everything what to do if you get pulled over from the cops. And we know people that are police, right? We have good friends that are cops and everything. So this is no, hatred or no, not trying to throw mud on them because I know they're good individuals. But overall, in the grand scheme of things, like, I can tell her everything to, hey, make sure you have everything on the dashboard. Make sure you don't, to make sure the music's down. All these other different precautions to put in place on how to operate when you get pulled over. And there's still that sense of despair, like just that situation could go left. Right. We just saw the verdict come out a couple of weeks ago, and that very same day, we saw video of a 16-year-old getting shot. Right. So, and along the way of the court thing, there were other different incidents that we had talked about on previous episodes that were coming out. So I feel like, especially when you're having the collective grief situation, there are some nuances that, unfortunately, are particularly relevant and salient to us that other people aren't experiencing. So I think that's just one thing that I feel like is absolutely, salient to our community as far as our grief, as opposed to, maybe a white individual who views the same thing and they're not going to experience that because they're not in that place.
I mean, I think that's a fact, right? And especially now in these times, one thing she was saying, I think she made a good point when she was talking about grief can activate like underlying trauma for people of color, right?
Yeah.
That's a big that's a big statement. And she was just talking about grief is often a shared experience, So it's like I understand, right? Because we all was hurting when Trayvon Martin was killed, and he all the way down in Florida, right? All the way down across the country. Of course, I'm being extreme, but I'm just saying, like, we felt that as a community. You know what I mean? There was the Black Lives Matter movement to an extent was formed out of that, right? So if that's not an example of a community experiencing grief together and then doing something about it, or trying to mobilize and do something about it, I don't know what is, right? So again, I don't think a lot of people aren't going to understand it, but I think she made some good points.
Yeah, totally. And even like to your point, when the Black Lives Matter, when that took place and began to gain momentum because of all of these killings, I mean it's like the grieving process that we're all familiar with gets disrupted because now it's a call to action. So as opposed to being able to go through the stages of grief, being able to process, to rest, all these other different things that are a luxury for some people when someone passes, we see some. No, we're called to action. We have to get up and we have to protest because we can't continue to have for this to continue to happen, right? We have to protest. We have to get into activism role, and that disrupts because so while we're protesting, while we're fighting, we're not grieving.
Right.
So it interrupts the peace. And then I feel like, especially in this collective, realm that we're all grieving together, I feel like our stage of acceptance turns into survival, right? It turns into a piece where now we have to go into survival mode because of what's happening, right? It's not just acceptance that this person passed, it's someone that looks like us, someone that we share an identity with. Now we have to go into survival mode of how we're going to be able to move through and go through the rest of our daily activities, in that manner. So it's like those nuances, and again, like a lot of people probably at first glance are gonna maybe be taken aback or not understand, but hopefully they're open into understanding the other dynamics that are included when as we're experiencing. There are some nuances that we're experiencing that another group of people aren't experiencing. So yeah, we're absolutely grieving differently, and I'm happy that you have someone that is providing these resources that are unique to, to us, because it's there's another dynamic. There are other different layers. There are other considerations that we have to factor in. Like you said,
I mean, I think
all those.
that's a good point that you brought up in terms of like the call to action, right? Because when you said that, I kind of looked back and I was like, well, man, like since Trayvon Martin was killed, have we had any time to grieve at all? Because more people keep getting killed.
One after another, man.
Right? So no, I don't think we've had any time to grieve. You know what I mean? You in a heightened, sense of alert, and then you feel like your own personal safety is jeopardized. So again, that's her point exactly, right? People of color experience, grief differently, because I think a good point that she was making is, other groups that aren't necessarily minority groups or marginalized groups, when they lose somebody, it doesn't necessarily transition into, well, should I get in my car and go to the gas station? Because they might stop me and kill me too on my block. Or they might shoot through my front door if I'm Breonna Taylor and kill me while I'm sleeping in my bed or in my house.
Right. It impacts our daily activities, like you were saying. Like you said it a couple of times. Like, well, if something's happening, someone's breaking into my house, I'm now cautious about even calling the cops.
Yeah.
How do I know that if something's going on, they're not going to come and shoot me in my own crib?
Bro, not even to cut you off, there was a guy, and I don't know his name right now, but there's a guy, he survived, but he was in critical condition 2 weeks ago. There was a fight at his house. He called the cops, same way that 16-year-old girl called the cops. He was outside with a cell phone, and they shot him and said they thought the phone was a gun. Listen, this is where we're at. You know what I'm saying? So, I mean, who gonna call the cops after that? You understand what I'm saying? So again, she has a lot of good points. A lot of people aren't gonna understand, but most people who won't, they're not really listening.
Exactly. So yeah, we'll stay tuned. But it was definitely a good article. I'm glad we got a chance to take a look at that and review it. All right, and staying along with the subject of race. So the United States Universities Debating Championship. Okay, so pretty much that's a debating organization where colleges from all across the nation come together. They debate. They have their debating contest. I'm not going to act like I'm this, debating savant or guru, because I don't watch it. But you have some pretty intelligent people that if you made the debate team, you're doing well.
Right.
You're absolutely most likely a stellar student. So earlier last month, the Morehouse College team, shout out to HBCUs, of course. Unfortunately, during the competition or during the tournament earlier last month, the Morehouse was subjected to racist taunts from the opposing team. So these taunts were in the form of the opposite teams were using racist caricatures on one of the students' voices when they were talking. When they were told to turn off, because this was a virtual event, right? So when the Morehouse team, when they were talking and answering the questions, the other teams were turning their cameras on, and again, that's prohibited because it's a virtual format of the debate. When speaking, people were laughing, they were talking, rolling their eyes, and again, the racist caricatures speaks volumes with that. So this is what was going on when Morehouse, when they were answering their question, and they were up for their team and for their categories. So they actually made the judges aware of what was going on, right? And so the judges also dismissed the arguments of the Morehouse team and awarded points to the other team regarding other different topics that were being argued, right? So along the narrative gentrification, Morehouse believed that their argument wasn't being heard. And so, so Morehouse, what they decided to do, they decided to pull out from the tournament. And as a result of them pulling out, because they weren't, the judges and the equity team who they're in charge of racial equality, sexual equality, and discrimination and those things. When the issues, when Morehouse brought these issues to the organization's equity team, they promised to release a statement addressing the issue and during the next round, but that didn't happen. The equity team dropped the ball on that, and they didn't issue any type of issue regarding the statement. So Morehouse made the decision to pull out of the tournament, which prompted other schools to pull out of the tournament. So that was Spelman, Clemson, and Vanderbilt. And as a result of that, the rest of the tournament was canceled, and a public forum was held for the students and judges from all across the country, and they were able to voice their discomfort and their stories of racism throughout 3 years of debate. So I'm gonna kick to you, Jay. What were your thoughts about this? I had some pretty strong reactions.
I mean, again, this is entitlement, right? By these kids, this is entitlement, microaggressions, of course, overt racist statements, of course, right? You find this a lot, right? Especially when it comes to higher education, right?
Mm-hmm.
Certain groups of people like to claim things as their own, right? And obviously, again, we've been in situations like this, right? So what I would assume probably occurred is them brothers from Morehouse probably presented themselves very well. They were well prepared. We don't even have to speculate on that. You understand what I'm saying?
Exactly.
So and we know the women of Spelman were prepared as well, right? So there's intimidation that comes with that. I'm gonna be very honest. Mm-hmm. HBCUs we come from are giants. So we can focus on the microaggressions and the disrespect. I'm gonna tell you straight up, I feel like they was just scared, right? That's the only reason why you do all of that, why you're mocking people, how they speak and messing with the camera, is because them brothers from Morehouse came and they probably looked clean, they was articulate, and they knew their stuff. And they got intimidated, and they do what any entitled brats do, right? They do this, right? Racist caricatures of voices, turning off the cameras, laughing, rolling eyes, you know what I mean? And all I'm saying is, and I'm not implying anything, violence in any way, but all I'm saying is, I doubt if they were all in the same room, they would have did the same thing. You understand? Mm-hmm. So these are entitled brats, and on another level, they're cowards. So that's all I have to say about it. I take my hat off for Morehouse for standing up. Definitely got to give Clemson, Vanderbilt, Spelman, for standing up. And listen, they got the desired outcome because the tournament got canceled. The equity team was supposed to handle that. They dismissed them, right? So what you do is you use your power, you step off. The whole tournament got canceled, and you see how they had to address it, right? They held a public forum where judges and students spoke about past racist incidents. So the kids from the young men from Morehouse, their actions were praised, right? They got actually support. If they were to tell me they held a public forum and a bunch of people was complaining, that Morehouse got it wrong, that's not what happened. You have basically what you have in a lot of situations that we've all been in higher education, right? When the opportunity comes, you have all the students and alumni talking about all the problems that they had to do, that everybody else swept under the rug or didn't care about. And all of this, I think how they put it was the correct way, because they quoted either Edwards or Strickland, and he was saying, it's not even about what they did today. It's about anti-Blackness within the debate space, period. Mm-hmm. So I'm sure if you talk to them, they've been dealing with microaggressions for years, going to these contests and these, debates. They just had enough.
Yeah, because these aren't isolated experiences or incidents. This has been going on for God knows how many years. And it was more significant for them to stand up and be like, look, you know what? We're not even going to continue doing this because we know this is going to go on for even more rounds, right?
Right.
I'm pretty sure they were probably, I'm going to call it what it is. Like Morehouse was probably in there kicking ass, man. They were probably doing what they do.
Right.
And, a situation that this was going to continue on, because when they brought it to the judges, obviously it wasn't anything being done about it. So
Right.
it was more significant, more important and significant for them to stand up and say, look, we're not going to take any more of this and pull out of it, because now that's going to raise the issue of it. Right now, that's going to bring awareness. And, in my review of all this, to me, Morehouse, Spelman, and shout out to Clemson and Vanderbilt for their support, they had more integrity than the whole organization.
Right.
Right. Because it's a situation where it's like, no, we're not going to deal with this level of disrespect. Like, they showed to me a level of siblinghood that that speaks volumes. And it's a situation I really, this is right out of the like you said, there we're intimidated playbook, right? So let's play the card. Let's do throw them off their game and start still the racial characters out there. Let's do the racist characters. Let's do all these other different things, because this is right out the thing. Y'all bringing the heat, so this is what we're gonna do. We gotta pull out the cheap shot playbook. This is what.
And I'm not trying
our
to
privilege is gonna protect us.
I'm not trying to disrespect nobody, but these kids was from the University of Hawaii.
Oh man,
you understand? And I'm not trying to disrespect the University of Hawaii, but we're talking about Morehouse. We talking about giants, legends. So obviously they had no idea who they was dealing with, right? So I'll excuse them for their ignorance, but not for their action, And all I'm gonna say is they got a dose of what they deserve, right? The school had to put out a statement, had to back off from it, all of these things. Why? Because they're embarrassed, because the students may not know who they was dealing with, but I bet you everybody at that school know the great Morehouse and what they've done, right? There's no question. Morehouse, Spelman, Vanderbilt, and Clemson pull out of something, you got major problems. And they got what they deserved. And I'm glad that Morehouse flexed their power like that. And more importantly, I'm glad they stood up. And listen, I would expect for them to be some changes, because there's going to be a light shined on this next year.
And even their the backpedaling and the damage control was subpar and terrible, because the University of Hawaii was like, oh, the group involved is not officially part of the University of Hawaii, and they're not a part of our school, our department. They're not even a registered student organization. They don't have a faculty advisor. How are you? What? Wait, how are you from the University of Hawaii? But then the kids, they're not from the University of Hawaii, and they're not a part of the school and registered student organization. Come on.
Listen, man. They moonwalking backwards. But it's okay. They rolled out the regular. Now, first of all, they wouldn't have said that if they would have won the tournament.
This is what I'm saying. Exactly. That is my point. Exactly. Let them.
So they backsliding now. Oh, it's all
good. It wasn't even a good backslide. It was a terrible move. Man. Man. And absolutely, like, I'm happy that they are going to shine light on this situation, because this has gone on for far too long. They didn't know who they were messing with in the beginning of that tournament, but they found out, which is why, we had to resort to these little cheap parlor tricks to try to throw them off their game. And that's like, Spelman and Morehouse, they're not going for that. And so absolutely, this needs to be addressed. This needs to be, highlighted, and a light needs to be shown. No, things need to change within this organization, and it's almost like the situation that backfired on them, right? Because they were probably thinking that, Morehouse is just gonna fold. They're gonna, you know what? We're gonna take a stand. And at the end of the day, nobody won. Like, you see what I mean?
Right.
Like, at the end of the day, your antics and your behavior, now nobody won. Now there is no tournament.
Right.
So, but absolutely, again, this shows all the integrity. This shows all the power and all the, for Morehouse and Spelman. And, I couldn't be even more proud to be an HBCU alum. So, they represented them well in a very professional manner. They were articulate with the statement that they put out and, their issues. And, this is what they do. This is their pedigree. So,
listen, I'm always back to HBCU, so I'm not gonna say nothing else about it. I'm just, listen, I was proud when I was reading this, just proud. And then the statement Spelman put out, I was proud of that too. We're not gonna let you disrespect our brothers. You know what I mean? It's not gonna happen.
The siblinghood is strong.
Yeah, man.
Good
moment.
Absolutely. So, we'll stay tuned. Anything else you got coming across your desk, Dr. J, you want to get off?
Nothing, man. Just of course, we want to thank everybody for listening. Please continue to comment. We appreciate every single like, every comment, and every person that subscribed. So please, we're gonna keep putting content out every week. We appreciate the support, and that's about it. Just thank you.
Yes, sir. So yeah, absolutely. Happy early Mother's Day. If we don't, the next episode might be a little bit after, so we just definitely want to shout out and acknowledge all the moms, all the godmoms, all the grandmoms, Mama J, absolutely happy early Mother's Day.
Definitely.
We appreciate everybody listening. Keep the comments and the feedback coming because, again, we want to talk about things that are important to you, that you have going on in your life, and things and topics that you want to, have discussed. We're all open to that. So, again, episode 12. Appreciate the support, everyone. Dr. J, Dr. Kyle, signing off.
All right, bro.
All right, man.